Hi, my name's Nathan Calloway. I'm 28, software architect, born and raised in a sleepy part of Missouri where big dreams were treated like bad manners, and where I was constantly reminded I should keep mine quiet. I design back-end infrastructure for systems that move millions of people's data in real time. If that sounds boring, I promise you, it's not. Somewhere between my third patent and my latest stock bonus, I realized I'd made it, quietly, on my own. But that's not what this story is about. This story is about what happens when the family who called you a bit slow, a little too odd, or not leadership material, suddenly finds out you're the one everyone else is calling a genius. It's about the day my mom, the same woman who once looked me in the eye and said I wasn't cut out for big dreams, posted my photo on Facebook with the caption, "My amazing son Nathan. He's always been destined for greatness." I wish I was making this up, but I remember that day so clearly I could draw you a floor plan of the kitchen I was standing in when it all started. 15 years old, barefoot on cracked linoleum, MIT's robotics summer program flyer clutched in my hand, freshly printed from the school counselor's office. I'd made it, one of only 7 teens from our entire state, fully funded. All I needed was her signature to confirm. She didn't even look up from her coffee. "Nathan, some people just aren't cut out for big dreams," she said. Then she took a sip and added, "And you're one of them." That was it. No shouting, no anger, just the verbal equivalent of a door closing softly in your face. And I remember feeling the burn not just in my chest, but in my ears, not from what she said, but how easy it was for her to say it. Like she wasn't killing something. Like she wasn't crushing the one spark I had managed to keep alive all those years. I stood there frozen for a beat before whispering, "But I got in." She didn't blink. "Well, sweetie, I just don't want you to set yourself up for disappointment." Disappointment. That's what she was worried about. Not mine. Hers. To her, dreaming big was selfish, unrealistic, embarrassing, because in our family, you were either practical or a problem. And I'd always been the problem. Meanwhile, Adam, my older brother, was the golden one, straight A student, quarterback, got into business school with a partial scholarship and was treated like he cured cancer. Mom used to say things like, "Adam's going places." And when he brought home a report card with 1B on it, she'd pat his shoulder and say, "Well, nobody's perfect, but me? 1B plus in physics," and suddenly I was too distracted with that computer stuff. That was the way things worked in our house. Adam got admiration. I got assignments. He got advice on how to manage success. I got silence. Or worse, pity disguised as parenting. "You always were a little different," Mom used to say. "Introverted," said Dad. "Quirky," said our guidance counselor. "Not like Adam," said everyone. I started coding in secret. I'd use the school library computers or stay up late pretending to do homework. I built websites no one saw, entered forums where no one knew my name. My world got quiet, but in the best possible way. And then something happened I never expected. Success. Not in the movie montage music kind of way. No, it was slow, lonely, quiet. I got into a state college with a strong computer science program. No one in my family even Googled it. They just said, "That's nice," and changed the subject back to Adam's internship at the bank. My first job out of school was at a tiny logistics software firm. I made less than a waitress in tips that first year, but I didn't care because I was building things, systems, real-world solutions. And then I wrote something, just one module, that changed everything. An auto-scaling cloud infrastructure protocol. It cut costs for the company by 42%. That's the kind of thing VCs notice, the kind of thing that gets you calls, and interviews, and offers. By 25, I was making 6 figures. By 27, I was consulting with Fortune 100 clients. At 28, I got listed in a top 30 innovators under 30 article on LinkedIn. And that's when everything blew up. I didn't even know the article had gone viral until Emily, Adam's wife, brought it up during a family dinner. She was showing someone her phone when she gasped, "Wait, Nathan, is this you?" She turned the screen. My face, my name, my article. I swear you could have heard a fork drop on the carpet. My mother froze mid-sip. Adam's smile twitched. Dad blinked like someone had reset him. "You've been working for this company?" Mom asked. I nodded. She smiled. Wide. Too wide. I always knew he had a spark. A spark? Lady, you smothered it with wet blankets for 15 years. That night, I left early. And the next morning, she posted the article on Facebook. "So proud of my Nathan. Genius runs in the family." And that's when it hit me. She wasn't proud of me. She was proud of being associated with me. Because in her world, love was conditional, and conditions had just been met. But I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Because I had something better than her approval. I had proof. Proof that I didn't need her to believe in me. Proof that I'd made it despite her. And now, finally, I was going to tell the whole story. Because behind every so-called overnight success is someone who was dismissed, doubted, and disrespected until it was too late to take credit for them. So, here it is. My revenge isn't loud. It's not messy. It's sweet. And if you've ever been the invisible kid, the weird one, the one who got told you'd never amount to much, stick around. Because you're about to see what happens when the underdog gets the last word. I used to think I was born broken. Not in the obvious way. I wasn't sick. I wasn't disabled. I wasn't failing in school. But there was always something about me that didn't quite click in the machine that was my family. I was the piece they never found a spot for, so they just left me rattling in a drawer somewhere, useful only when everything else fell apart. By the time I was 7, I could already tell that I was the other one. Not the favorite, not even the backup favorite, just extra. The one who didn't belong to any photo proudly displayed on the fridge. The one whose trophies got dusty in the hallway cabinet, while my brothers were front and center in the living room. My brother, Adam, he was the mold they expected me to grow into. And when I didn't, they decided I was defective. He was tall, loud, charismatic. He smiled with all his teeth and always knew how to make adults laugh at his jokes. My mom used to say, "Adam's going places," even when he was in detention for punching a kid in gym class. And my dad, well, he didn't say much, but you could see it in his eyes when Adam walked into the room. That subtle lift of his chin, like, "There's my boy." I never got that look. I got the nod that said, "You still here?" When I was 9, I built a solar-powered water purifier for my science project. It wasn't fancy, just a DIY setup made from plastic bottles and some charcoal layers I read about in an old Popular Science magazine. I worked on it for weeks, stayed up late testing different filters, even burned my hand trying to solder a seal shut. On the day of the science fair, I was so proud. My teacher gave me a ribbon, said it was exceptional work. I took it home like it was gold. My mom looked at it, then at me and said, "That's nice, honey. But you didn't win first?" That was the first time I felt the heat crawl up the back of my neck. The kind of heat that tells you should be ashamed of something, even if you're not sure what. I remember nodding, like she was right, like I should have done better, like exceptional wasn't good enough. That's how it was with her. There were no tantrums, no slaps across the face, nothing dramatic. Just quiet cuts delivered with a smile and a tone that said she was only trying to help. She wanted what was best. She wanted me to be realistic. She wanted me to stop embarrassing myself with all this dreaming. When Adam said he wanted to be a business executive, she beamed. When I said I wanted to design machines that helped people in developing countries, she laughed, softly, but enough to sting. "Honey," she said, "you don't even like talking to people. Maybe stick to something simpler, like accounting." She didn't say it to be cruel. She said it because she believed it. And somehow, that was worse. By the time I turned 13, the gap between us was no longer just emotional, it was structural. Adam had a new iPhone before the rest of his classmates even knew what apps were. I had a Nokia with missing buttons and a prepaid plan that ran out of minutes before I finished one call. He got new shoes for every football season. I got hand-me-downs from some distant cousin whose feet were 2 sizes bigger than mine. But it wasn't the stuff that hurt. It was what the stuff meant. When Adam brought home a C on his report card, my parents blamed the teacher. When I brought home an A, they asked what went wrong. Adam's failures were obstacles. Mine were evidence. And the thing was, he didn't even try that hard. He was the kind of person who could breeze through a test he barely studied for, charm his way out of a speeding ticket, or get a job offer just by showing up in the right blazer. People wanted to like him. They wanted to give him chances. No one ever gave me anything, which is probably why I learned to stop asking. I started retreating more and more into my own world. I borrowed books from the library and copied pages I couldn't afford to keep. I watched MIT OpenCourseWare videos on the school's slow, laggy internet and wrote code on a borrowed Chromebook from my public school's tech grant program. I built my first game by sneaking into the computer lab after hours. I didn't even tell anyone when it got 5,000 downloads in a week. Who would I have told? My mom wouldn't have understood it. My dad would have shrugged. Adam would have made a joke. The more I grew, the smaller I became in their eyes. Every time I built something I was proud of, it felt like I was adding bricks to a tower only I could see, while they kept trying to fit me back into the ground floor. But somewhere deep down, I stopped caring if they saw the tower. I started building it for me. By freshman year of high school, I was interning remotely for a small software company in Oregon. It was unpaid, but I didn't care. They gave me real problems to solve, bugs to squash, features to test. I learned more in those 6 months than in 2 years of math classes. And the lead engineer, Ravi, told me I had something rare: clarity under pressure. He said most juniors freeze when the system crashes. I rewrote the function that caused the crash and suggested a better architecture without being asked. I've worked with people twice your age who don't think like that, he told me. It was the first time an adult outside of school saw me as something more than smart for my age. Still, at home, nothing changed. At dinner, they'd talk about Adam's latest leadership role in student council. They'd show pictures of his football games. Once, I tried to talk about an app I was building to help visually impaired students navigate campus using beacons and Bluetooth triangulation. Mom cut me off to ask Adam if he was going to prom. I still remember the silence after that. How I just nodded, kept chewing, and let my voice die mid-sentence. That was the night I decided to stop speaking, unless it was worth the cost. I started saving up money on my own, doing freelance work on platforms that barely allowed minors to join. I lied about my age. I took on gigs fixing databases, optimizing landing pages, even ghostwriting code for college seniors who didn't know the difference between Python and Java. I do my homework at 6, code from 7 to midnight, then wake up at 6 a.m. to clean the house before school because Mom still expected chores from the child she pretended didn't exist. She only acknowledged my work when it benefited her. Like the time our internet went out and I reconfigured the router settings and ran a new cable through the attic. She didn't thank me. She just told me to clean the dust I left behind. Or the time she asked if I could help fix her email, and I ended up building her a filtering system to keep spam out. She told her friends the provider updated their algorithms. She never gave me credit, but she had no problem taking comfort in the benefits of my work. It was like I was the house elf from Harry Potter. Useful but invisible. Always there, never invited, but something kept me going. Not revenge, not even anger, really. Just the hunger to matter somewhere. Somewhere beyond that kitchen table. Somewhere beyond those cold, sarcastic smiles. Somewhere I could be someone without needing anyone's permission. I didn't walk across any glamorous stage when I graduated high school. No one threw a party for me. Adam's graduation had been a full-blown event. Balloons, banners, photos printed on foam boards. Mine was a family dinner at Applebee's where no one even asked me what I planned to do next. They just assumed I'd follow Adam's path, go to community college for 2 years, transfer somewhere local, get a job at the bank like he did. Safe, predictable, respectable. But I'd already been accepted into a mid-tier university with a strong computer science program. Not Ivy League, but respected. More importantly, I had a scholarship, full tuition, housing included. When I told my mom, she squinted like she didn't understand. They're giving you money? Yes. For computers? Yes. That's strange. She said it like I was scamming someone. Adam, of course, made a joke. Guess all those basement hours finally paid off, huh? My dad just grunted. Well, don't screw it up. So I left. No one helped me pack. No one cried when I drove away. No framed photo in my suitcase. Just an old duffel bag, a used laptop, and an invisible fire in my chest that hadn't gone out in a decade. And college, it felt like stepping into a different universe. For the first time, I wasn't the weird one. I wasn't Adam's little brother. I was just me, Nathan, the guy who could reverse engineer software without a manual, the guy who could sit quietly for 2 hours and then say one sentence that solved the entire team's problem. Professors noticed. Peers respected me. Suddenly, I was being invited into private Slack groups, after-hours coding marathons, and networking events I couldn't even afford to dress for. But no one cared what I wore. They cared what I built. And I built. God, I built like my life depended on it. Because in a way, it did. Every script I wrote, every module I tested, every failed prototype that led to a working one, it was like laying bricks of a future no one else believed in but me. I remember the first real win I got. It was a campus hackathon. Nothing major, just 48 hours of pizza, energy drinks, and barely any sleep. Our team designed an AI-driven inventory system for small businesses. The code was messy. The UI was ugly. But it worked, and it worked well. We didn't win first place, we got second. When I called home to tell my mom, she didn't answer. I left a message. She never called back. That night, I went outside and sat on a bench behind the engineering hall. I looked up at the sky and whispered to myself, this still matters, even if no one saw it. And that became my mantra. It still matters, even if no one saw it. That same year, I got invited to contribute to an open source project that dealt with distributed systems, the kind of thing only PhD-level engineers usually touch. I stayed up till dawn writing pull requests, learning from the core maintainers, debugging issues for people who didn't even know I was still an undergrad. Eventually, someone on the team offered me a paid remote gig. I didn't even know how to negotiate rates. I just said yes and hoped I wasn't being underpaid. I probably was, but it didn't matter because that money, it meant I didn't have to call home to ask for help anymore. And that silence, that independence, was the sweetest thing I'd ever earned. Still, I didn't tell anyone, not my family, not even Adam, who was still working at the bank, still living in our hometown, still getting most likely to succeed awards from our mom every time he bought a new appliance. The summer after my junior year, I was offered an internship at a tech startup in Austin. Not Google, not Apple, but something scrappy. Something promising. They let me touch real code, not intern projects, but production stuff. My mentor said I was preternaturally calm under stress. He said I had architect's eyes. That internship turned into a part-time remote job, then a full-time offer after graduation. The CEO shook my hand and said, "We don't usually hire this young for this role, but honestly, we'd be idiots not to." When I tried to explain this to my mom, she asked if I was moving back home. "No," I said, "I'm staying here. They're giving me a signing bonus." "Bonus?" she repeated. "Like extra money?" "Yes." "For what?" That was all she said. For what? As if my value had to be justified. And when I told Adam, he laughed. Startups go under in 2 years, dude. You'll be back. Maybe he was right. Maybe I would be back. But not for the reasons he thought. Because what I was building, it wasn't just a career. It was a boundary. A wall. A quiet, massive, undeniable wall between me and the past. And every hour I spent writing code, I was laying another brick. Not out of spite, out of survival. Her name was Zoe, and she saw me. Not the resume, not the output, not the clean syntax or flawless deployment strategy. She saw me. I met her during my last year of college, in a shared elective we both took by mistake. It was a psychology course, of all things, and I only signed up because my schedule was too full for anything else. She had pink streaks in her hair, wore black boots even in summer, and introduced herself by handing me a sticker that said, "Debug your life." I didn't know it then, but that single sticker was the first gift anyone had given me in years that didn't come with a condition attached. She was majoring in animation, minoring in cognitive science. She loved beautiful problems, as she called them. I loved elegant solutions. Somehow, that made us a perfect match. At first, we only talked between classes. Low stakes, nothing personal, but slowly, something cracked open. Maybe it was the way she asked questions no one else asked me. Like, what do you dream about when you're not solving problems? Or, what did you want to be before they told you what to be? I didn't have answers at first. I didn't even know how to talk about myself without reducing it to metrics. But she waited. She never rushed me. Just left the space open for me to step into whenever I was ready. And when I finally did, she didn't flinch. When I told her about my mother, about how I once stayed up all night rebuilding her broken laptop and she blamed me when the wallpaper changed, she looked furious, not confused. When I told her about Adam, how he failed upward his entire life while I had to prove my worth every waking hour, she didn't try to balance the narrative. She just said, "That's not okay." I didn't know I needed someone to say that out loud until she did. Zoe was the first person I ever showed my passion projects to before they were perfect. With everyone else, I only shared the final product, the award, the app, the achievement. With her, I showed the messy drafts, the debug logs, the post-it notes taped to my wall at 3 a.m. And she never once looked at me like I was strange. She called me a builder, not a genius, not a nerd, not a success, just a builder. "You make things that work," she said, "and when they break, you make them better. That's who you are." She became my safe place in a world that had never offered me one. She was the one who sat beside me when I wrote the code that eventually caught the attention of the startup that changed my life. She was the one who cheered when the deal went through, not because it meant money, but because it meant freedom. And she was there the night my name first appeared in a tech journal's Rising Stars list, a list I hadn't even known I was on. She brought over a tiny cake with a USB candle stuck in the middle and sang, "Happy debugging to you," like it was a national holiday. That night, she asked me something I'd never heard from anyone in my family. "Are you proud of yourself?" And I just stared at her because I didn't know how to answer that. Because I had spent so long chasing pride from people who weaponized it. Because I didn't even know what my own version of pride looked like. "I don't know," I said. She reached over, placed her hand on mine, and whispered, "Then let's figure it out together." From that moment on, I started building not just systems, but boundaries. For the first time, I had someone beside me who didn't see my silence as a flaw to fix. She saw it as the space I needed to think, to process, to breathe, and in return, I gave her the same space. It wasn't romantic at first. It didn't need to be. It was deeper than that. It was a bond forged in the quiet. She knew about my family, about the birthday cards that never came, the holidays where Adam's gifts got wrapped with ribbons and mine came in reused gift bags, the phone calls that ended with my mom reminding me that, "You never really call, you know," as if the silence wasn't her invention in the first place. Zoe didn't try to make excuses for them. She didn't tell me to be grateful or give them time. She said, "They don't see you because they never learned how to look." And that hit me like a freight train, because she was right. My family didn't fail me by accident. They failed me because they chose not to learn who I was. They preferred the version of me that stayed quiet, stayed out of the way, stayed predictable. And when I deviated from that script, when I started succeeding in ways they couldn't understand, they panicked. They minimized. They dismissed. Zoe, on the other hand, learned my language. She knew what it meant when I stared at my screen in total silence for 2 hours. She understood the difference between "I'm fine" and "I'm surviving." She never forced me to open up, but when I did, she was there with open ears and no agenda. She was the first person to ask about my why, not just my how. And that question changed everything, because for the first time, I realized I didn't want success just to prove them wrong. I wanted success because I loved building things that mattered, because I wanted to create systems that could carry weight that no one else wanted to hold, because I wanted to build a life I didn't have to apologize for. And Zoe, she didn't just believe in that life, she helped me blueprint it. The first time Zoe met my family was an accident. We were back in town for a tech conference I was invited to speak at. Not a panel, not a workshop, a keynote. A 27-year-old giving the keynote address at a conference filled with VPs, CTOs, and engineers twice my age. My mom still thought I was doing something with apps. She had no idea. After the speech, which went better than I could have dreamed, Zoe suggested we swing by my old neighborhood for a quick look. I hadn't been back in over 2 years. I wasn't planning to go at all, but something in me agreed. I think I needed to see it, to feel how far I'd come. The house was smaller than I remembered, the yard more unkempt, the windows slightly fogged with age. But inside, nothing had changed. My mom opened the door and acted like I was the mailman. No hug, no hello, just a nod and a half smile like she'd been interrupted from something mildly interesting. "Oh, you're in town?" "Yeah, just spoke at Tech South." Her eyes blinked slow. "What's Tech South?" "Big conference, Austin Convention Center." Adam's been traveling a lot too," she said, turning away. "He's regional manager now. Florida, Georgia, I think. Got promoted last spring." It was always like that. I could have said I won a Nobel Prize and she'd still pivot the conversation to Adam's latest microwave purchase. But then she noticed Zoe. "And who's this?" "This is Zoe," I said. Zoe extended her hand, polite but firm. "Nice to meet you." My mom smiled that brittle smile again, the one she saves for polite strangers and bank tellers. "Oh, how sweet. Nathan doesn't usually bring girls home." Zoe smiled back. "I'm not just anyone." That line, that one sentence, it was everything I had wanted to say my whole life but didn't have the nerve to. Not just anyone, not forgettable, not interchangeable, seen. We sat in the living room for a while. My mom talked about Adam, his new promotion, his gorgeous wife, who really knows how to dress, how they just closed on their second house. She didn't ask me a single question, not about the talk, not about my work, not even about my life. Finally, I stood up. "Well, we should get going." "Already?" she said, but it sounded more like relief than disappointment. As we turned to leave, she called out, "You know, Nathan, you could learn a thing or two from your brother." And that was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in clarity, like the last fog lifting. I realized she didn't just fail to see me, she refused to, because if she admitted what I had become, she'd have to admit she was wrong. About me, about everything. I didn't say anything. I just walked out the door. Zoe followed, silent, her hand finding mine the second it closed behind us. We didn't speak until we reached the car. Then she asked, "How do you feel?" And I said, "Free." Because I was. I finally understood that I didn't need her to recognize me to exist. I didn't need her applause to be valid. I didn't need her to love me the way I always wanted, because I had already built a life without it. I had built a company, a reputation, a future, and most of all, a self. She didn't make me. She didn't believe in me. She doesn't get to take credit now. But she tried. God, did she try. Because 2 weeks later, after someone posted a clip from my keynote that went semi-viral, I got a notification. My mother had shared it. No message, no explanation, just the video and a caption. My Nathan. Always knew he was special. It got dozens of likes. Old family friends chimed in, teachers, neighbors. You must be so proud, they said. And she replied to every comment like she'd been cheering me on all along. Zoe showed it to me with a raised eyebrow. I stared at the screen for a long time, and then I laughed. Not bitterly, not cruelly, just truthfully. Because the woman who once said I wasn't cut out for big dreams was now trying to claim credit for them. And I let her. Because at that point, she wasn't the gatekeeper anymore. She was just a bystander to a story that moved on without her. And that story was about to hit its climax. It started with an invitation. A simple, innocuous envelope slid into my mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon. Thick cardstock, the kind you know costs too much just by the weight. On the front, the Calloway family celebration, printed in gold foil. My mother never did anything small when it came to Adam. Inside was a note from her, handwritten. We're hosting a dinner to celebrate Adam's latest promotion. He's now overseeing the entire Southeast region. So proud. Hope you can make it. Would love for you to finally be part of one of these moments. There was no apology. No mention of the years she left me out. No acknowledgement of the fact that every moment until now had been a shrine to Adam, with me shoved into the background or cropped out of the frame entirely. But something in the wording caught me. Would love for you to finally be part of one of these moments. As if she were offering me a seat at the grown-up table. As if I hadn't already built the table, chairs, and dinnerware somewhere else. I showed the card to Zoe. You going? She asked, her voice careful, neutral. I think I have to, I said. But not for her. We both knew what I meant, because by now something had changed. I was no longer the kid showing up to a war unarmed. This time I was coming in with an arsenal, and they had no idea. The night of the dinner, I wore my most boring clothes on purpose. Faded jeans, plain button-up, no brand logos, no designer shoes. I wanted to look as average as possible. I knew that was the only version of me they were comfortable dismissing. Zoe came with me, dressed in that effortless elegance that made people underestimate her. Until she opened her mouth. The house was packed. Relatives I hadn't seen in a decade were there, all smiling at Adam like he was the second coming of Steve Jobs. There were balloons, a banner that said, "To the top," in gaudy silver letters, and a 5-tier cake that looked like it had been custom-made by a wedding planner. Adam saw me and raised his glass. Well, look who finally came out of the basement. I smiled. That's me, I said, crawling out of obscurity. He laughed, already half drunk. Glad you could take a break from all those, whatever it is you do, apps and coding and stuff. My mom swept in, kissing Adam on the cheek like he'd just returned from war. Then she turned to me and gave me the same look she used to give the dog when it tracked mud across the carpet. You look tired, she said. Long week, I replied, holding her gaze. Running a company does that. She blinked. Oh, right. Your tech thing. Yeah, I said. The tech thing that just closed Series C funding. 80 million. Post valuation at 400. The words floated there for a moment. No one caught them. Not really. So I said it again, slower. $400 million. And silence followed. Not because they understood, but because they didn't. They were searching for a reference point, trying to plug that number into their mental spreadsheet of what counted as real success. Adam's new company car, his 4-bedroom house, his promotion. But 400 million? They had no idea what that meant. I leaned closer to my mom and added, And I didn't tell you because I wanted to see if you'd invite me, even when you thought I was still just the kid who couldn't win first place." Her smile froze. "And Zoe?" She just sipped her wine, watching it all unfold like a carefully written play, finally reaching Act 3. There's a very specific kind of silence that happens when people are forced to recalibrate everything they thought they knew about you. It's not the peaceful kind, not thoughtful. It's the silence of a system crashing, like an old computer trying to load a file it can't process. That's what I saw on their faces. My mother's eyes blinked rapidly, as if trying to restart her script. Adam looked at me, then at Zoe, then back at the wine glass in his hand, like maybe the alcohol was playing tricks on him. "What do you mean, company?" he finally asked, his voice slurring just slightly. I turned to him and smiled politely. "You remember CloudLink, the thing that powers over 30% of U.S. online checkouts?" He squinted. "No." I nodded. "That's okay. You've definitely used it, probably every time you order something online. I built the load distribution protocol behind it. The company I co-founded handles the real-time architecture. My uncle, the same one who once asked me why I didn't just become a teacher like a normal smart person, choked on his whiskey. "No offense," I said, "but most people don't really see the plumbing under the empire." My mom finally found her voice. "Well, you never told us. How are we supposed to know?" She said it like that excused everything, like her ignorance was my fault, like her decades of dismissal were justified simply because I hadn't mailed her quarterly updates. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "I stopped telling you," I said evenly, "because every time I shared something, you changed the subject. Or you said I was getting ahead of myself. Or you made some comment about how I should be more like Adam." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "You called my dreams unrealistic. You said I wasn't built for big things. You said I needed to be more grounded, that I wasn't cut out for the kind of life I wanted." Everyone was staring now. The air had thinned. Adam scoffed. "Come on, man. You're acting like you were mistreated. You had a roof, clothes, food. Nobody beat you." That was the line. That was always the line. Nobody beat you. As if emotional starvation didn't count. As if being dismissed for decades didn't leave scars just because they weren't visible. "I didn't need to be hit," I said. "I was erased over and over again. And you know what the worst part is? They all leaned in, even if they didn't mean to. The worst part is, I believed you for years. I believed I was less. I believed I was forgettable. I believed that nothing I built mattered because none of you cared enough to ask about it." You could hear a pin drop. The only sound was Zoe placing her wine glass gently on the counter. "And now?" I said. "Now you're all shocked. But the truth is, I didn't change overnight. I've been doing this for a long time. You just never looked." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a folder. From it, I slid a single sheet of paper across the table to my mom. She hesitated before taking it. Her fingers trembled slightly. It was a printed headline from Forbes. "The Quiet Architect. Meet the 28-year-old behind the internet's most reliable backbone." Her lips moved as she read it silently. Then she looked up, pale. "This is you?" I nodded. "Page 3 has the interview. Page 4 has the photos. And the last paragraph talks about how I grew up in a small Midwestern town where nobody thought I'd amount to much." I leaned closer so only she could hear. "They asked me what kept me going when no one believed in me. I told them I did it to prove something, not to the world, to one person." Her face flushed, then drained. Zoe stood beside me now, a calm shadow. She didn't need to say anything. She was the statement. "You all taught me how to survive without applause," I said. "But Zoe taught me how to thrive without permission." Someone behind me whispered, "Damn." Adam tried to laugh again, but it sounded hollow. "You really think money makes you better than us?" he said, almost angry now. "It's not about money," I said. "It's about being seen." Then I looked around the room, at the aunts and uncles, the cousins, the neighbors. All these years, you treated me like background noise, and now you act surprised when I become the headline. I could see the calculations spinning behind my mother's eyes. She wasn't absorbing the emotion. She was tracking the optics. How this would look to the people around her. How she'd allowed the son she brushed off as awkward and unrealistic to become someone too big to ignore. And worse, someone she didn't recognize anymore. She picked up the Forbes page again, trying to reassert control. Why didn't you ever tell us any of this? We would have supported you. We would have... No, I cut in. Not loud, just final. You wouldn't have. And don't rewrite the story now that it's convenient. Everyone watched her fall silent. Even Adam didn't rush to her defense this time, because despite his ego, he understood hierarchy. And right now, the power in the room had shifted. You only value things you understand, I continued. And the second you couldn't measure my success by your own small standards, you decided it didn't count. Zoe stepped beside me, her hand brushing my arm. A tiny gesture, but grounding. Solid. I didn't even realize how tight my chest had gotten until her touch calmed the pressure. And what exactly do you want from us now? Adam snapped. His voice was sharper now, no longer amused. He'd moved from mocking to defensive. Nothing, I said. That hit harder than a scream. I don't need anything from you. I'm not here for revenge. I'm not here for approval. I came tonight to see if the version of me you built in your heads could survive the truth. They said nothing, because they knew it couldn't. I looked at my mother one last time. All I ever wanted was for you to see me. You didn't. Now, you'll see me whether you want to or not. I reached into my inner coat pocket and took out another document, thicker than the last. I didn't just build CloudLink. I built a venture firm this year. Early stage, tech-heavy, founder first. We just acquired a local real estate asset in Missouri for our next data expansion facility. This house? I turned slowly, looking at the living room, the kitchen, the hallway with the faded family photos, all the places I once tiptoed through like a ghost. It's on the same grid. I handed her the paper. She stared at it, confused. What is this? She asked. A zoning proposal for a redevelopment project. This block's about to shift, and once the permit's finalized, every house here will be approached with a buyout offer, above market rate, for everyone. She blinked hard. But I've already purchased 3 properties on this street, I said calmly, through a holding company. The house next door, mine. The duplex across the street, mine. Zoe added, we offered them a 40% markup. They signed within a day. My mom's hand dropped to her lap, the paper dangling like a defeated flag. You're going to tear down this house? She asked, voice thin, unsure. No, I said. I'm going to let you decide. Her eyes widened. Decide what? If you want to stay here, I'll offer you a buyout, like the others. Or I'll offer to move you somewhere quieter, nicer. But either way, this neighborhood, it's not going to look the same next year. Adam stood up, almost knocking over his chair. Are you serious right now? He shouted. You're buying the block we grew up on like it's some goddamn chessboard. I'm securing infrastructure, I replied coolly. It just happens to intersect with where we used to live. But this is our home, he said, jaw clenched. I stared at him. You made it yours. You all made it clear I never really belonged here. I was just passing through. And now, well, I'm holding the deed. It wasn't about power. It wasn't about control. It was about truth. About finally forcing them to see the weight I carried all these years. And the empire I built from it. Zoe spoke up then, her voice calm but crystalline. You didn't lose him, she said to my mother. You never really had him, and that was your choice. Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't confused silence. It was stunned silence, wounded silence, the kind that follows a deep cut, the kind that bleeds slowly. And in that silence, I felt something in me settle, not out of spite, not out of satisfaction, but out of a strange, earned peace. I'd finally said everything, and they'd finally heard it. Adam was the first to break. He sat back down, hard, like someone had knocked the wind out of him. For a few moments, he just stared at the floor, jaw clenched, one leg bouncing violently. The same tic he used to have when he got benched in high school football and couldn't accept it. "You think this makes you better than me?" he muttered. Not to me, really. More like to himself. I didn't answer, because deep down, he wasn't asking me. He was asking the world, begging it to validate the version of himself he'd spent years maintaining, the one where he was always ahead, always favored, always chosen. That version had just been cracked like porcelain, and no one knew how to fix it. My aunt finally spoke. "Well, this is a bit dramatic, don't you think?" I turned to her, the same woman who used to comment every Christmas that I was quiet, or shy, or not quite like the others. "You think this is dramatic?" I said. "Imagine being told your whole life that your worth depends on being someone you're not, then realizing you don't have to wait for their permission to be who you are." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing she could say that wouldn't prove my point. My dad, who had been quiet all night, finally stirred. He looked older than I remembered, smaller even, like the years had crept into his spine when no one was watching. He cleared his throat and said, almost softly, "I didn't know." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even regret, just a statement. I met his eyes. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid, or small, or desperate to earn his attention. "You didn't want to know," I replied. He didn't deny it, just nodded slightly and looked away, like he'd finally run out of excuses. Then came my mother. She sat straighter in her chair, paper still in her hand, jaw tight with that manufactured grace she always used to save face. She looked at me like I was a stranger, not a disappointment anymore, not a problem to fix, but someone she had no blueprint for. "I raised you," she said. "I did the best I could." "No," I said quietly. "You did the best you were willing to do." She flinched, barely, but it was enough. "You loved Adam because he reflected the image you wanted to see. I was a mirror you couldn't look into. I reminded you of things you never chased, so you called it unrealistic, immature, irresponsible. But it wasn't." She looked down at her hands. "I'm not angry anymore," I added. "I just don't need your validation. I came here tonight for closure, and now I have it." There was something freeing in saying that. Not cruel, not triumphant, just clean, like cutting the last thread holding a sinking weight to your ankle. I turned to Zoe. "You ready?" She nodded. We walked toward the door without a single person stopping us, and just before I stepped outside, I turned back one last time. "To be clear," I said, "I'm not kicking anyone out of anything. I'll send over the buyout offer next week. What you do with it is up to you." Adam didn't look at me. My mother's lips were trembling, not in sorrow, but in confusion, like someone waking up from a dream they can't return to. "You always said I wasn't cut out for big dreams," I said. I smiled. "Turns out you just didn't know how to recognize one when it was sitting at your kitchen table." And then I left. The door clicked shut behind us like the final punctuation of a chapter I'd spent my whole life rewriting. Outside, the air felt colder, cleaner, like I'd finally stepped into the present, leaving the ghosts of expectations behind. Zoe slid her arm around mine as we walked to the car, not speaking. She didn't need to. Everything had been said, and the silence that followed was the kind that made room for healing. Inside that house, I knew they were still sitting there, stunned, processing, maybe bargaining. I imagined Adam pacing the room, muttering to himself about how it wasn't that big of a deal. My mom probably rereading the paper I gave her, trying to find some loophole, some detail that would make it all less real. But it was real. Every detail, every word, every quiet victory they had refused to see. I didn't build this moment out of anger. I built it out of necessity, because there comes a point when you stop trying to be heard, and instead you build something so undeniable they're forced to listen. As Zoe drove us back to the hotel, she reached across the console and laced her fingers through mine. We didn't speak for most of the drive, just the hum of the engine and the streetlights cutting across the windshield in soft intervals, a rhythm, a calm. "You did it," she finally whispered. I looked out the window. "No," I said. "We did." Because the truth is, no empire gets built in isolation. Yes, I had written the code. Yes, I had made the decisions. But Zoe had held the scaffolding when I didn't trust the foundation. She saw me when I still doubted I existed. When we got back to the hotel, there was a message waiting for me. It was from a private number. I opened it without thinking. I didn't know. I didn't see. I should have. "I'm sorry, Mom." I stared at the screen for a long time. It wasn't enough, but it was something. I showed Zoe. She read it, handed the phone back, and said nothing, because she knew the decision wasn't about whether to reply. It was about whether to carry the weight of it or finally set it down. I didn't answer. I let it sit, because sometimes silence is the only answer that truly echoes. The next morning, something strange happened. I woke up, rested, not just physically, but emotionally. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to defend myself. I didn't feel like I was hiding. I didn't feel like I was still that kid trying to make the people around him care about the little glowing bulb in his hand. That version of me had done his job. He survived, and now I could move forward without dragging him behind. Zoe and I had breakfast in a quiet cafe overlooking the city. The world kept turning. Emails kept coming. Deadlines kept approaching. But none of it felt heavy anymore, because now I wasn't working to be seen. I was just working. I checked the analytics dashboard for our latest product launch. Record numbers. Our server uptimes had hit a new peak. A global apparel company had just signed a pilot contract. And somewhere, a woman in a suburban kitchen was reading articles about the son she thought she'd lost to tech stuff, learning that she never actually knew him, and that he had learned to thrive without her. That night, I posted something on my LinkedIn. It wasn't petty. It wasn't aimed. It was just true. Some people are fueled by applause, others by silence. But the ones who build in the dark, they don't need to be loud. Their work will echo louder than anything ever shouted. It got shared thousands of times. I didn't need to read the comments, because the real reward wasn't in the reactions. It was in knowing that the kid with the wind-powered bulb had become a man who could generate his own light. No permission needed. The thing they don't tell you about truth is that it doesn't just set you free. It burns everything behind you to the ground. I didn't hear from Adam for almost a week after the dinner. Then, out of nowhere, I got a text. "You really think you're better than everyone now? Just because you got lucky in tech? Keep your damn money and your smug attitude." I read it while standing on a balcony overlooking downtown Austin. The city pulsed below me. Cars, movement, ambition. I sipped my coffee and let the message hang on my screen like a mosquito that didn't realize it was seconds from being swatted. I didn't respond, because the truth was, I didn't need to be better than him. I just wasn't under him anymore. For years, Adam had existed on the unspoken assumption that he was the default winner, the golden boy, the one whose shadow I'd never outgrow. When that illusion shattered, it wasn't just his ego that cracked. It was the entire story our family had wrapped around him like armor. And when armor breaks, it doesn't just fall. It cuts. I imagine him now, spiraling, trying to make sense of a world where I no longer needed his validation, where my quiet success had outpaced every promotion he'd ever received, every congratulatory dinner he'd been thrown, and, worst of all, where the parents who once ignored me were now forced to sit in the silence I'd once endured alone. I knew my mother was reeling too. The message she'd sent the night of the dinner, short, unfinished, more panic than apology, was only the beginning. A few days later, she posted a photo on Facebook. It was me as a child, probably around 10 years old, sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by wires, books, and a half-assembled robot made out of cereal boxes and duct tape. The caption read, "He was always meant for something bigger. We just didn't see it back then. But a mother always believes. Deep down, she always knows." It was laughable. Zoe showed it to me while we were having dinner. She didn't even need to say anything. I could feel her eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd respond. "I should comment," I joked, "and just write LMAO. But I didn't, because that post wasn't for me. It was damage control, rewriting history in real time so the neighbors, church friends, and Facebook audience wouldn't ask the hard question, where were you when he needed you most? I didn't comment. I didn't like the post. I just let it sit there, a sad public monument to a private failure. And yet, even in the chaos of their unraveling, a part of me had hoped that someone would step forward and say the right thing, that maybe one of them would stop spinning and just sit with the truth. That didn't happen. What did happen was quieter, stranger. My cousin Sarah called me. We hadn't spoken in years. She used to babysit me when I was little, the only person who ever brought me books instead of toys. "I watched the clip of your keynote," she said. "Then I read the Forbes article, and then I cried. I didn't know what to say." "You deserved better," she continued. "We all saw how they treated you. We just didn't know what to do." There was something in her voice. Guilt, shame, maybe even admiration. That was the first olive branch that didn't feel like manipulation. It didn't excuse everything, but it was real. So I said, "Thank you." And we talked for hours. It was the first time in years that someone in my family saw me without needing to revise their memory first. I didn't make a grand statement when I cut ties. No dramatic letters, no rage-fueled speeches, no ultimatums, just silence. A slow erosion of contact, texts left unread, calls redirected to voicemail, birthdays passed without reminders, holidays skipped without guilt. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it out of necessity. Because once you've tasted peace, you don't go back to chaos just because it's familiar. Zoe understood. She never pressured me to mend things. She knew I wasn't looking to erase my past, only to stop letting it dictate my future. I spent the following months pouring myself into work, not to prove anything, but because I loved it. Because finally, the work was only for me, not for attention, not for redemption, not for their approval. We expanded our firm, hired smart, treated people right, grew responsibly. I started mentoring younger developers, especially ones who reminded me of myself, quiet, overlooked, brilliant, in ways no one had bothered to ask about. I spoke at more conferences, not because I needed to be heard, but because I had something to say, something that might reach someone else sitting at a dinner table where they were invisible. And still, from time to time, I'd hear about my family through the grapevine. Adam's promotion plateaued. He was passed over for a regional VP role. Apparently, the company was restructuring. My mother kept posting old photos of me, childhood shots, awards she never showed pride for in the moment, now captioned with lines like, "So proud of my boy," and "Look how far he's come." People congratulated her in the comments. She thanked them with emojis and exclamation points, as if she'd been there every step of the way. But she hadn't, and I never corrected the record, because the people who mattered, they already knew the truth. One day, a former neighbor messaged me, "Your mom brags about you all the time now. She told us you bought property in the area, said you're the one saving the block. That true?" I thought about responding. Then I didn't. Let them believe whatever version helps them sleep. Because the truth doesn't need to scream. It just needs to outlast the lie. And that's what I'd done. Not just outgrown the version of me they had built, but outlasted it. And now, I was writing something new. Not a revenge story, not a cautionary tale, a blueprint for anyone who's ever been told they're too quiet, too weird, not cut out for it. You don't have to argue. You don't have to prove. You just have to keep building until one day They're forced to look up and realize the thing they buried became the foundation of a world they can't ignore anymore. I used to think healing would come when my mother apologized, when she finally looked me in the eye and said, "I was wrong. I see you now. I'm sorry." That moment never came, and I've made peace with that, because what I've learned is that healing doesn't always come in the form of justice. It comes in replacement, in building a life so full, so vibrant, so rich with new connections that the old absence stops echoing. I didn't go back home for the holidays that year, or the year after that. I stopped sending gifts to people who never asked me what I needed. I stopped making space for those who couldn't even hold my name without flinching. Instead, I spent Christmas in a cabin with Zoe and two of our closest friends, Julian and Maya, both engineers, both survivors of their own quiet wars. Over a fire pit, we grilled ribs, played card games, and laughed until our ribs hurt. No performance, no guilt, no comparisons. That night, Zoe toasted. "To the families we build," she said, raising her mug. I looked around the room. Mismatched socks, messy hair, laughter, comfort. And for the first time in my life, I felt home. This was my family now. The one I chose. The one that saw me as I was, not as I failed to be. I started calling it my chosen family. And the more I said it out loud, the more it stuck. There was nothing performative about it. These were people who knew what I'd built, and not just in terms of code or capital, but in character, in resilience, in grace. They didn't need me to prove anything. They didn't compete. They didn't keep score. We showed up for each other not out of obligation, but out of understanding. When I bought a small house outside the city, not a mansion, not some luxury flex, just a beautiful home with light and air and quiet, they helped me move in. No speeches, no photos posted for clout, just sweat, pizza, and music playing from an old Bluetooth speaker. And afterward, when we all sat on the floor of my empty living room, eating greasy slices and leaning against cardboard boxes, I realized something simple and powerful. I didn't need my mother to come around anymore, because I had surrounded myself with people who had already arrived. I still get messages from strangers. Some are developers, some are artists, some are just kids in quiet towns trying to make noise with limited tools. They tell me things like, "Your story helped me not give up," or "I thought I was the only one who grew up feeling invisible." And every time I reply, not with cliches, not with hollow inspiration, but with honesty. I tell them, "You don't need to scream to be heard. You just need to keep building." I've given keynotes to packed halls. I've sat on investment panels with people I once idolized. But my favorite thing? Still mentoring. Once a month, I block out an entire Friday and meet, virtually or in person, with 5 people who remind me of who I was. I don't look at their credentials. I look at their hunger, their obsession, their quiet belief that there's more inside them than anyone ever bothered to notice. That's who I do this for. Not for the awards, not for the LinkedIn bragging rights, not even for the redemption. I do it for the version of me that stayed up until 3 a.m., coding in the dark because it was the only time the house was quiet. For the kid who asked for robotics kits for Christmas and got socks instead. For the teenager who watched his family celebrate mediocrity while ignoring magic happening right under their noses. You don't have to become a CEO, or rich, or famous. You just have to reclaim your story. Because the moment you do, the moment you stop asking them to see you and start seeing yourself, everything changes. The silence stops hurting. The bitterness starts fading. The weight becomes lighter. And eventually, you stop looking backward entirely. You stop needing them to say, "We're proud of you," because you are. I once stood in a kitchen where I was told I wasn't built for big dreams. Now I walk through office hallways where people ask how I built this. I was called too quiet, too weird, too different. Now I speak, and the room listens. Not because I shout, but because what I built speaks for me. And if you're reading this, if you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, told to be realistic, let me leave you with this. You are not too small. You are not too late. You are not invisible. You are the builder of something only you can make. So build it quietly, relentlessly, unapologetically. And one day, they'll look up from their small world and see yours towering above them, not because you demanded it, but because you didn't need their permission to begin.